Good morning, friends and students of literature and cultural studies. In 20th century, English departments are known as culture studies departments. And the short talk I gave you about culture. What is culture? That's a question. Very often we confuse culture with other things, culture with religion, culture with identity, and all that. It is a commonly used in everyday speech and it is one of the notorious elusive terms to define. It's very difficult to define what it is. But the word culture comes from the word cultura, literally meaning cultivation. Now, the agriculture term cultivation was first is used in non-agriculture sense by the Roman orator Cicero, the Latin phrase cultura allumini, cultura animi, meaning cultivation of the soul. And this is a non-cultural use of the term, went into the sort of hibernation before reappearing in 17th century Europe. Matthew Arnold, we more often we are acquainted with the book Culture and Anarchy. He defines culture, you know that. Culture is then properly described not as having its own origin in curiosity, but as an origin in its having, it's for the love of perfection. It is a study of perfection. Culture, it moves by the force, not merely and primarily by the scientific passion of pure knowledge, but also the moral and social passion for doing good. In the 20th century, culture transgressed the periphery of common discourse and emerged as a separate branch of anthropology. And the branch is called now cultural anthropology, Sanskritika Manava Shastra, you can say. And culture in the term in American anthropology, it signifies two things. One is the signification of symbols, and other one is that of classifying these symbols into several categories depending on the specific experience of specific communities. So, in the book Origin of Culture, K. Auruch defines. He says that it is a complex whole which includes knowledge, belief, art, morals, law, customs, dress, and other cultural abilities and habits acquired by man as a member of society. This view, though itself is evaluative to a degree, corrects the Arnoldian participants and selectivity with regard to culture. James Fraser, some of the people know about him. In his book, The Golden Bough, it was published in 1925, he defines culture. He says that the main feature of culture is belief in the magic, which Fraser holds is common to all cultures and high or low. And there is one cultural anthropologist named Franz Boas. In his book General Anthropology in 1938, he gives a short definition of culture. Culture as a relationship between man and nature, which concerns itself with the fact of dependence on nature. That is, with the ways in which a man secures and preserves food, builds shelter, makes natural objects and implements. Secondly, the man between man and man, which indicates the intended relationship between members of the society or between the members of the different societies. Thirdly, the subjective aspects, which include subjective responses of the members of society, community to the manifestation of life, contained in the aforesaid mentioned relationship, have emotional and intellectual contents and encapsulate the rational thought process pertaining to ethics, aesthetics, and religion. And another American anthropologist, Rolf Linton, in his book Study of Man, says, each member of society need only to acquaint himself with as much as his total culture is he needs to fit himself to fill a particular place in the life of the community. This means that the only limit to the possible content of culture is that the combined learning abilities of the individuals who together compose the society which bears it. Actually, this limit has never been approached. No matter how rich or a complex a culture may be, there is always a room for new elements. Raymond Williams defines in his seminal work, Culture and Society, he says the idea of culture is a general reaction to a general and major change in the conditions of our common life. Its basic element is in its effort to total qualitative assessment, the change in the whole form of our common life produced as a necessary reaction as an emphasis on attention to the whole form. Particular change will modify an habitual discipline, shift a habitual action. General change, which it has worked itself clear, drives us back to our own as general designs, which we have to learn to look at again as a whole. And next, we come to the definition given by G. Hofstede, a Dutch psychologist, social psychologist, in his book Cultures and Organization, Software of the Mind. He differentiates between culture and identity, Sanskriti and Asmitate. Culture is not the same as identity, he says. Identities consist of people's answers to the question with each, where do I belong? They are based on natural images and stereotypes, on which the emotions link to the outer layers of the onion, but not to the values. Values remain the same. Populations fight each other on the basis of different felt identities, may very well share the same example. Here he gives the example of the people of Europe going to America and finding themselves a new identity. He says, at home in a Dutch feels that he is a Dutch in Dutch, Dutch in a different, and Belgium feels that he is a Belgian in Belgium. But when he goes to US, he thinks that he is a European. So the identity is changed. The identity depends on the question, where do I belong? That is it. It also implies the role we perform. Next, culture is that is never uniformly distributed in a community or a social group. It can be explained in terms of sociogenic and psychogenic factors of a culture. And lastly, I sum up main features of culture. What is culture? The answer to the question is to that. Culture is very brittle, frangible and fuzzy notion. It always in a state of flux. It's not static. Second, it involves the through history and generations, refers to commonly prized values and widely preferred norms. Culture is adaptive, meaning that an individual born to a given cultural setup to internalize his values and norms. At least a sizable part, if not for the whole, of a culture comprising values or norms must be shared by its mother members of the society. Otherwise, there is no meaningful communication and adjudication can be possible within a community. And next one is the symbolism, Sanketikate. Symbolism is a part or parcel of any culture, which is to say cultural messages are to be encrypted as symbols. Next, it's never uniformly distributed in a society or a community. It is always heterogeneous. Next, various aspects of culture is always interrelated, one to the other. Every culture has a distinctive pattern and constitutes the collective program in the mind of the members of the given culture community. Cultural borrowing is in a two-way process, giving and taking, which implies that the so-called civilized and primitive cultures exchange their cultural values and norms freely. It is always we say cultural assimilation and cultural dissimilation, and sometimes there is a cultural fusion also, and cultural items or things taken back. There is an influence and sometimes confluence also there. A study of culture should be descriptive, not evaluative, meaning that an analyst of culture should be sort of hierarchizing two given cultures on the basis of his observation. So even every society has different cultures and high cultures, low cultures, dominant cultures, and subaltern cultures. And you know that every community wants to retain its own culture. That is there. But culture is different from identity. Culture is different from religion. We must say we should never confuse that culture is religion. Religion basically implies a belief in the supernatural which controls the human life. It includes the worship and other rituals and religious practices, and it is different. So, culture is different, religion is different, the culture is different, identity is different. Okay, thank you.